Hi, welcome to Ed Talks. I'm Harold Jansen. I'm the Board of Governors Teaching Chair at the University of Lethbridge. And today I'm interviewing Shelly Wismath, who's Professor of Mathematics in the Liberal Education Department, and somebody who I've always found to be actually an inspiration for teaching. So this is a real honor to get to talk to you today, Shelly.
Thanks.
And so I was looking and I was realizing that it's been 25 years since you won the Distinguished Teaching Award. You were one of the very first winners of it.
Yes.
It's not that old an award. So tell me a bit about how your sort of teaching career has evolved over these many years. I mean, obviously you were good at teaching right from the start, but...
It's funny, when I was growing up, I never wanted to be a teacher. It was always something, there weren't that many choices for women in those days anyway. Teaching was one of them, and I never wanted to be a teacher, and I ended up getting a job here teaching as an academic assistant, teaching labs by accident. And about a month in, I suddenly realized one day, wow, I really like this. So I kind of became a teacher by default. And I taught here for about 5 years while I was a PhD student, and got to really like it. And at the end of that 5 years, that was when I won the teaching award. And I find it interesting now to look back, because at that time I focused on teaching math content, and I tried to be fair and accessible to students and be clear about what I expected and to explain things really clearly. But I don't think I'd ever thought really deeply about teaching at that point. So I think my teaching has evolved a lot since then. Not long after that, I guess, I got involved in 2 projects that really started my reflection as a teacher. In the early 90s, I started teaching a particular math course, Math 2000, that I helped revise quite a bit. And it, for me, became the sort of it captured a lot of what I cared about in teaching. It was a course for second-year students, and the textbook names say it all. They're all called Bridge or Transition to Abstract Math. It was a transition course between the computational lower-level stuff and the theoretical higher-level stuff. And every time I taught it, I found myself backing up. Oh, we need to back up a step or two because they don't understand this. And I began to realize how much of our curriculum in many courses, and especially courses like that, is really hidden. So for me, I've always been very interested in the difference between content and process. And lower level math courses in particular are usually content-based courses, and we just teach content. And as long as you're getting through everything, that's enough, right? And I began to think a whole lot more about what's the process here? What do we really want them to know? I was trying to teach them to think like mathematicians, and it forced me to think about, well, how does a mathematician think, and how can I possibly communicate that to them, you know? Up until then, it was just stand up there and do it in front of them, and they'll be able to figure out how to do it.
Magically.
Magically, by osmosis. And that works for the top 10%, but not the rest of the class. So that, for me, was the start, I think, of a real process of examining my teaching and my thinking and my own learning, and trying to relate that to what students were going through.
Were you observing that it just wasn't connecting for students? They weren't doing very well, and I found I needed to explain things in a different way. There was so much that mathematicians take for granted about the way they think and talk and write. I'm sure it's the same in any discipline. You can look at a problem, and after years of practice, you kind of know instinctively, right.
Oh, you do this one this way. But students would ask me why, and I would have to then try and articulate, well, how did I know that that was the right way? What are the clues? And unpack that for them. And
I'm curious what sparked this self-reflection, because a lot of us run into where our students aren't just getting it. And I've noticed, and I'm certainly guilty of this at times too, but I've noticed with a lot of people, our first instinct is we blame the students, right?
Yes,
Or we
yes,
blame
yes.
their high school teachers or a combination of things. So what made you sort of look at yourself instead of looking at what we're doing in the classroom?
That's a good question. I think in that particular course, it was because the students were very frustrated. It was the hardest of the second year courses, and it's a gatekeeper course as well as being the transition. It would keep people from pursuing further courses. So it was important to us to get students through it successfully. And I guess I just hate to see students unhappy or frustrated.
Right.
I want them to understand. So partly it was that, a combination of things. The 5 years when I was a PhD student, I was also teaching here first time, full time, and I remember how nervous I was about my comprehensive exams in an area that I didn't know or like very much. And that made me much more sympathetic, I think, to my students. I could see their struggles. They need this course to get where they want to go. And one of those years, at least, I was going through the same thing and could empathize with them.
I think it's harder the further we get away from being students, right? Remembering what it was like to be there.
Yes, what it was like.
I've been observing as my kids get closer to university, as sort of seeing things through their eyes a little bit has also kind of reinvigorated this for me, giving me a new appreciation for that. I mean, there's always a balance here because, I mean, we have to look at what we're doing in the classroom, but students still do bear a certain amount of responsibility for it.
Yes, they do.
It's not that when they're frustrated sometimes, well, you deserve to be frustrated because you're not doing your part of the bargain.
But often I think we don't tell them that. One of the experiences that really stood out for me around that time was a third-year course in real analysis. And it's probably the hardest of the third-year courses. And one year I had a group that I thought was quite weak. And I was worried about them, and I thought, they're all going to fail the midterm. So I tried to set up the midterm in such a way that everybody would at least pass. And I did that by asking, the first half of the test was all definitions. Define this concept, define this concept, define this concept, and then sort of applying them. And I thought, okay, that way they'll all get at least 50%, and they'll get enough of the application questions to get part marks, and it'll work. Well, they did worse than ever. And I was totally shocked. And I went in and said, I thought I was being nice to you guys and helping you by asking you things that I assumed, I took for granted. The first thing you do is learn the definitions. Right. And they looked at me very blankly, and I realized that I and my colleagues had never said to them, the first thing you do in math is learn the definitions. We took that so totally for granted that we never actually said it to them. And so we had a very blunt talk, my students and I think it really helped. And ever since then, I try to make much clearer not just the content, but how it's organized and how they should study and what's important and all those process kinds of things. So
what are some of the practical ways you do that? I mean, I've increasingly realized this as well. We have all these expectations and we want to have high standards, but if you don't give them the tools to succeed, it's not fair.
It's not fair, and it just frustrates them and it frustrates us. Well, I don't know that there are any really explicit techniques I use. I just try to be very open about my expectations and my goals and the sort of pedagogical goals about the nature of the subject. And so I talk about tests, for example, when a test is coming up. Okay, I will say to them, what do you think is going to be on the test? What's the first question on the test? And of course they look at me very blankly, and I try to give them some hints. Okay, I'm a very linear person. So what was the first thing we covered? What was the first chapter? What was the main gist of that chapter? What are you supposed to know from that? Okay, then what's the first question? And by then they can usually, start telling me.
To guide their studying.
To
and they're
guide
thinking
their
about
studying,
it.
right?
Yeah.
And I describe, okay, how do I make up a test? And in certain courses, at least, I can kind of walk them through the process. Well, I make a list. These 5 chapters, each had 3 sections. The main theme of this section was, so I want one question that addresses that. And those are things that I think students should be doing for themselves. And I think the good students figure that out. But most of them, nobody's ever told them that,
It's often struck me that as professors, when there's been the self-selecting things, we were all the really good students, but we're the ones who intuitively figured those things out, and to try to put ourselves in the shoes of people for whom that doesn't come as easily is often difficult for us.
Yes, very much so. And as you said, it's often the case that we don't even remember far back before we thought that way, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's really a challenge to try to remember what it's like from their point of view. But I do think it's important to have those conversations with students about learning and about studying and study skills. Sometimes I give a practice test, a small quiz a couple of weeks before the first midterm, just to give them an idea of the kinds of questions. That usually makes a difference.
Yeah.
And just lots of conversation.
In the balance of sort of content versus process that you talked about, now presumably, students are still learning content, but the way you're approaching it is just different.
Yes, I think so. Certainly in the math courses that I've taught, they're very content heavy, and often you have to get to a certain point in the content for the follow-up course. But I don't think it necessarily takes a lot of time away to talk about process if you kind of build it in. But I've also, in some ways since then, moved away from that kind of very content-driven course. Now that I'm teaching in Lib Ed instead of in math, that's quite a different style of course too.
So when you're emphasizing the process of learning, I guess one of the challenges is that different students approach things in different ways, right? So how do you navigate that? You could have a bunch of students, and there could be 5 or 6 very distinct ways of approaching subject matter. So I'm curious, are you talking more about your process, or are you helping them to discover their own process, or giving them suggestions of different ways that they might approach things?
Well, a combination, I think. Depends on the course. In the more traditional math courses, it's probably more of me describing my process, describing the mathematical process in a way. But in some of the liberal education courses, I have in the last few years been doing conversations with students about thinking and learning styles, for example, in the Liberal Education 1000 and some of the other courses. And so the first week I have them do surveys and figure out their thinking and learning style, and then we talk about those, and we talk about the different ways you would study or take notes or do the work in a course depending on the style. And that's been a very fascinating thing for me. That's something that I've only started doing in the last couple of years, and I'm really keen on it.
Yeah, are you seeing the students appreciate that?
Yes, very much so, yes. So one of the surveys we use is the learning styles, so how you take in information.
Right.
And that's the standard visual, auditory, tactile, or read-write learner. And most of the students will say to me, yes, I've known since grade 3 that I was a visual learner, but nobody ever sat down with us and said what that means.
About what you need to do.
About what you need to do. And so we talk about the different styles, but I also ask them then, besides identifying your own, spend a week watching your profs and try and figure out what their styles are. And then how do you accommodate? If you're someone who learns by reading and writing and your prof is totally auditory, spends a 50-minute class lecturing and never writes a word down, how are you going to cope? And I think students realize often there's a fit between the prof and the student. If they approach things in the same way, they're very comfortable. But if they're not, it's really difficult, right? So we talk about that and how you sometimes have to change up your strategies to work with a different style of professor.
That's interesting because I know a lot of faculty members are resistant, saying, well, why should I change what I'm doing, right? And you are still putting the responsibility on the student, which is interesting. It's not dumbing down or asking everyone to change and do.
And I must admit, I've learned that I am very heavily read-write. I'm not comfortable without a piece of paper in my hand. I write down all my notes. I don't always use them when I get into class, but I carry them around as a crutch.
Yep.
But I'll say
just the process of having written it once helps you,
but
right?
having written it. And so, I still say to students, okay, this is my style. If you're comfortable with that, fine, but if you're not, here are things you can do instead. And I try to make an effort, maybe not as much as I could, but to do things a little bit differently,
So a lot of this is culminated in this course, I've always look at the courses that I would love to take at the university, and this is very high on my list, this puzzles course that you do, which has been just a really unique kind of thing. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, I would love to. It's an amazing course. I've done it 4 times now, and it grew out of my involvement in liberal education. I moved to the liberal education program about 5 years ago now, and I have become very interested in teaching math first, and then more broadly in teaching critical thinking skills to non-math, non-science students. And this course, Problems and Puzzles, became a way to do that. So problem solving is a huge area in the math curriculum, but it's also, in a much broader way, I think, a huge area just in life, in life skills. We all have to solve problems all the time. And so I decided that somebody should offer a course in problem solving, and nobody else seemed to be leaping into it, so I thought I would try. It was one of my projects with the teaching chair. I spent a semester planning it, and it's been the most amazing teaching experience, I think, that I've ever had. I was never the kind of mathematician who loved problems and puzzles, so I kind of went into it thinking, I'm not a very good problem solver myself, but maybe I can figure out if there are skills that can be taught, and if I can learn them, maybe anybody can learn them. And it kind of grew from there. So the course structure is built around doing puzzles. And I learned practically the first week that if I talk too long, the students just glaze over, but if I give them a puzzle, they will work for hours. So this is my strategy. I try to keep lecturing down to 10 or 15 minutes, maybe 2 classes a week, and the rest of the time they have problems and puzzles to work on. Every Friday we have a big puzzle that's a full class puzzle. And
full class, and it takes the whole...
It takes the whole class. It's a bigger one. And they're kind of loosely organized into themes and topics.
So what kinds of puzzles do you do typically?
Quite a variety. We do logic puzzles, the kind kids do in school, where you've got 4 kids in 4 houses, and the kid with the dog lives in the blue house, you know those. We do some of those. We do counting puzzles. We do number patterns. We do some word puzzles. We do a unit on a survey of the earliest riddles, starting with the riddle of the Sphinx from ancient Greece, and we look at historical puzzles over the centuries. There's a famous puzzle book from, I think, 800 AD by a monk named Alcuin of York, and there's some classic puzzles that he set. So we do a great range of puzzles. There's sort of something for everyone. And we talk about the strategies, so different kinds of puzzles. If we're doing counting puzzles, we might spend 10 minutes talking about different counting rules. You know, how many ways you can do some multi-stage process. If you know how many, you can do the first stage in 5 ways and the second stage in 10 ways,
right.
that kind of thing. And then they work on puzzles. And what's been amazing for me is the engagement of the students. Somehow, if you make it fun, make it a puzzle, they will work on it in a way that they never like to work on math. So that's been exciting.
I've observed that in some of the things that I've tried to do too. If you sort of build in a story or a question,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
And that's what motivated
Yes.
most of us to become academics, is we're
Right.
just
Yes.
curious about
we're
things.
curious, and you come across an intriguing question, and you think it's simple at first, and then you realize, wait a minute, it's more complex, and pretty soon you're hooked.
So one of the challenges I found, though, when you have a very activity-based kind of thing, is trying to pull it together, right? You can just be everybody kind of worked on their own.
Yes.
So how do you do that? How do you try to draw some conclusions, or from what, like, well, I guess
Yeah.
to step back, what are your objectives? What are you trying to achieve by having them work on all these puzzles?
That's evolved over the 4 offerings of the course. The first year, I think I was just happy that they could solve a whole bunch of puzzles, but I realized more and more, with help from one of my colleagues, that in a way it's a course about metacognitive learning. It's a course about learning problem-solving skills and thinking about those skills and monitoring how you use them and when you use them, when you work with others, when you work alone. So I try to build in, besides the actual doing puzzles, there is a fair amount of reflection and discussion that goes on around the puzzles. So for example, I might introduce a new topic on a Monday, a theme or a technique, and then we spend the rest of Monday and Wednesday doing puzzles. But after every puzzle, we do have a kind of debriefing. And I try to deliberately choose puzzles that have more than one way to solve them. And that's one of the things that's fun, because in the class of 40 people, there might be 5 or 6 different solutions. And so once just about everybody has finished, then we talk about how different people solved it. And I'll have people come up and describe it on the board or just talk from their seats. And we talk about all the different ways, and we relate that to things like thinking and learning styles, and to approaches from different disciplines, for example. And that debrief is very powerful, I think.
Do you find it falls in kind of predictable patterns, that students who solve one puzzle in one way tend to use similar kinds of strategies throughout, that line
they
up with
do.
learning and
somewhat,
cognition styles?
Yes. And particularly in the first half, people have their kind of favorite techniques and styles. And they do get more comfortable branching out by the end, I think. One of the things that I like about the course is that it's, I try to make it a very low-risk kind of atmosphere, and I think, you know, the first week or so, they're in this be a good student mode, and they want to know, will this be marked, and, you know, do I have to be the first to solve it? And we try to get over that quickly. And they become very comfortable with the idea that solving the puzzle is not the goal. Learning is the goal, and developing skills is the goal. And so I notice, for example, in the first half, often it'll be, okay, I've solved it, I'm done, I can get out my cell phone and do something else. Whereas by the end it's, oh, I found this way, but she found a different way, and let's see if it's quicker and which is more efficient, and how did other people solve it. And they really get into that, thinking about what they've learned from it and how it connects to previous puzzles, those kinds of things.
Must be exciting to watch that.
It is. Yeah. It's amazing to watch, yes.
How do the students do
because
when there's lots of ways we use problem-based learning, for example, medical schools are very big into this kind of technique, and increasingly even in business and other kinds of schools. So do students, have they come back to you and say they've been able to apply these things in more real world? Because puzzles are often, they're sort of these artificial constructs, right?
Exactly.
And we want to see how does that apply. So.
And we talk about that towards the end of the course. Are the skills you learn doing these artificial little logic puzzles, are they transferable? And what exactly do you get out of those? And I have the students do weekly reflection assignments as well. So they're thinking and writing about these things. And yes, they give amazing examples. I've had students say that they're doing a lot better at writing essays, for example, because they've learned to tackle a complex problem, to break it into pieces, to identify what's important and what's a red herring in a puzzle. Manage their time better, those kinds of skills.
That's not something I would have thought would have naturally flown from
I know.
them.
It's amazing, right? And we do a unit on logical reasoning and analyzing arguments for the logic puzzles. They find that beneficial. I've had students who use the course as preparation for law school entrance exams.
I can see that.
And 2 years ago, I had a couple of students who were applying for med school. And it was really interesting because we spend a lecture or two talking about real-world problems. And there's some really nice examples out there of interview questions from big companies in the States. For example, places like Best Buy or Amazon. Their interview process involves an open-ended question, like, how many gas stations do you need in a city the size of Los Angeles? Or how many planes are flying over Kansas right now? And so I give the students these and they have a stab at them. But the point of that is that the interviewers don't expect anyone to come up with the answer is 73.
Right.
What they want is to hear you take an open-ended kind of problem, think your way through it, and strategize, well, I would need to know this, and is Kansas a hub or a spoke, and what time of year is it? And they want you to think about all the factors that would have an impact and reason your way through it in a couple of minutes. And that's exactly the kinds of skills that we're working on. So there were 2 students who were applying to med school, and interestingly enough, they came back 2 weeks later and they had just had their exams. And their exams were exactly that.
Oh, wow.
They were given a scenario, and they had 2 minutes to think about it, and then they went in and thought out loud in front of a board of examiners, thought their way through a situation. And some of them were med school based, but some of them were these very general, open-ended kinds of things. So I think some of the students do see real connections. The skills that they're using really are transferable.
I do have to pass on the one complaint I've heard from students about this course. It's very hard to get into
because
it's very popular. And
it fills up quickly.
So I'm going to pass that on, which is a sign that obviously it's working very well.
Well, it's really fun. It was, in a way, very scary for me the first few times that I taught it.
Off the beaten path from the kind of courses that we do, right?
And especially from math courses where everything is so cut and dried. I go in at the start of the semester with a binder of notes and I just draw a line where I finish each day and start the next day from there, right? And the first time I taught the Problems and Puzzles course, I couldn't even get my notes organized. It's totally nonlinear, which is hard for a linear person like me. And what's really scary is you go in with a puzzle and you have no idea. Is it going to take them 50 minutes? Is it going to take them 15 minutes? Worse, half of them will be done in 15 minutes and the other half will need 50 minutes. So I had to learn to let go of a lot of control. I'm a control freak, so I always had things tightly structured in my classes, and that doesn't happen in this course.
Has this empowered you to sort of take more risks in other courses?
Yes, I think so. Yes, it was challenging, but exciting, and it worked in that context. And so, I've tried to be a little more open in other courses too.
It's hard. It's hard to put yourself out there because
Yes.
I mean, I'm sure you've had experiences. I'm going to ask you, have you tried taking a risk and had it blow up on you? If you tend to be a little more structured, that probably hasn't happened to you as much as some other people.
Not real blow-ups, but yes, certainly things that didn't go over well, and topics that in retrospect you could have covered very differently. And yeah,
it's tough. It's tough in those content kind of things, and especially in math where the emphasis on the prerequisite structure and the scaffolding, like you have a responsibility to your colleagues in a way that we don't have in a lot of other disciplines. So that would be very challenging, I can imagine.
And that's a nice thing about the puzzles course. As far as we get is how far we get. And
exactly.
Yes, it's self-contained.
Yeah, so we say, I'm not prepared for puzzles 2000 or puzzles 3000, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, so I've asked you a little bit about how sort of your teaching has evolved and more of an emphasis on sort of process and helping people to think about how they learn rather than delivering content, which is something we're seeing all over the place in education. I guess the other question is, how have students changed over the course of your career? Are they the same or are they different? This is something I've been, as I get increasingly far from my student days, I've been thinking a little bit about whether students are they different than when I was a student and in what ways?
It's somewhat common in math to complain about how ill-prepared they are from high school.
We do it in political science too. Yeah.
I'm not so sure. I think the strong students are as strong as ever, and there's a good proportion of them. Some of them are weaker. I think, thinking back 30 or 40 years, certainly, higher education is much more accessible, and you get more people going to school, to university. I don't know that they're all that different in ability. I complain about the writing quality, but probably that was always bad. I do think that the student focus is different. Certainly when I was an undergraduate in the 70s, you went to university to learn, and there was an assumption that you didn't know what you would do after, but something would turn up, and I certainly felt that way. I never intended to be a mathematician or a university professor, but I had no clue what I was going to do, but I enjoyed learning math. I think students today maybe have to be much more goal-oriented and job-focused. That's a big change. They also have very different lives. In my time as an undergrad, almost nobody had a job other than going to school. If you did, it might be 5 or 10 hours a week. I was a marker a bit, but basically you took 15 hours a week of classes and you spent 30 hours a week of working for your classes, and that was your life. And these days, it always surprises me. I ask the students how many hours you're working, and they're all working. Many of them are working 30 hours a week or more and going to school, and almost everybody's working at least 10 or 15 hours a week. So that really changes the time they have available and the focus that they have and just the complexity of their lives, I think we were spoiled in a way, maybe in my generation. Well,
you just had that leisure time to sit and argue with your friends over coffee, right? And
university was your life, right? And that's what you did. And now, for many students, they're dashing onto campus for a class and then dashing back to work and maybe back again here for a night class, and they don't have that single-minded focus. So that's different, I think. And I have to remind myself that my course is not the only one they're taking, and their studies are not the only thing going on in their lives.
Even though it should be, right? And clearly our courses are always the most important ones.
Yeah, I guess I still tend to think it should be, but maybe that's a luxury now. And it's what you said earlier, that those of us who went on to academe, we were a kind of self-selected group anyway, and maybe there's still that top percentage that do build their life around their studies and
have
go on to
scholarships and
yes, and
things
get
like
a lot
that.
of scholarships
Yeah.
and research jobs. So instead of working at McDonald's, they're working in research during
Yeah.
the summer, and that kind of feeds itself, right? It's a self-perpetuating cycle. Then you do better.
So you've talked a bit about the transition you made from obviously being a good teacher and very thorough and being a little more sort of self-reflective and about what you're doing. You've also sort of made the other sort of jump, which is also moving into doing more research on
Yes.
teaching and learning. I was wondering if you could, so what led you to make that leap? Because a lot of us make that first leap, but you don't make that next leap. And I'm curious what
Well, in
what
some
drove
ways,
you to do that.
it came about with the problem-solving course. Around the time that I first developed it, I moved from teaching math to teaching liberal education, and I owe a lot of the research switch to my colleague Doug Orr in the teaching center. I was meeting with him about something else and started describing this course that at that point was still in the planning stages, and he got very enthused, as he always does. He energizes a lot of people on campus, and he offered to get involved with it. And while we were talking, I thought, well, we should start maybe collecting some data then, and we should think about this more purposefully in terms of a research project into problem solving. And so with the first offering, with Doug's help, I started collecting data from the students, and it snowballed from there, and it's become a long-term project. I think we have 5 or 6 papers that we've written now on various aspects of things. And it's been very exciting and very enriching. I'd never had that before, that my research tied into my teaching. People always talk about how wonderful that is and that that's a hallmark of good teaching.
Right.
But when you do really abstract algebraic math research, there aren't any courses. I've never taught a course in my research area. There aren't any courses, and so that really just never happened for me until recently. But now I've found this very energizing cycle where the research feeds the teaching of the course, and the teaching of the course feeds the research, and very exciting.
So I mean, I've tried things in the classroom, and I think, oh, that would be really cool, but I always think about it too late in there, right? Because you want some pre-test data, and you don't get around to doing that.
Yes.
So it was a conversation with Doug that led you realize that this could be a research project.
So we started right at the
Okay.
beginning, yes, and that turned out to be important. The first time we collected a lot of data, a lot of which turned out to be irrelevant, but by the second time we had a better sense.
More focused questions.
Yes,
right?
more focused questions, had a much better sense of the course. I changed a lot of things. It was a much better offering the second time, and we knew better what we wanted to know about. Yeah.
And so you've presented this at conferences
Yes,
and
we've
things
been
like that?
to a couple of conferences, and we have a couple of papers that have been published or are in the process of being published. We're working on one right now, which may be the final paper in this sequence, about collaborative learning. So one of the things that's been striking in this course is that we leave it up to the students how much they work together on the puzzles. As an introvert myself, I never wanted to force other people to work in groups.
I'm the same way.
I hated group
yeah.
work. So I don't force them into groups. I let them choose. And when they get a puzzle, it's entirely up to them. They can work alone, they can work with others, they can move their chairs around, they can shift back and forth from alone to with others. And we found some amazing patterns that are very consistent over 4 offerings about how people work together and when they work together and why. And so we've been writing
So
about
what kinds
that.
of things did you find? Because I struggle with the same thing. I'm like you, I hated group work. I'd come
Yeah.
into a course, Oh, there's a group thing?
Yes,
Right up the door,
exactly.
I'm out of here.
That's
I
how
don't
I
want
was.
to do this.
I always felt I can do it better and faster myself.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
students mostly hate group work
Yeah.
because they don't like being dependent on others for marks.
Yeah.
It's really hard to schedule outside
Yeah.
of class time. So what we do is not the kind of typical group work. It's not graded. It's not outside of class. It's voluntary. What we found is there are kind of 4 stages in problem solving, which are clearly identified in the literature. And our students seem to go through cycles. The first stage, they work alone. The second stage, they work with others. The third stage, they go back to working alone. And at the end, they work with others. So we first noticed this very early on. We would give out a puzzle, and all the chatter in the class would die away, and it would be perfectly still for 10 minutes. They would read the puzzle, they would try on their own, and then after about 10 minutes, you'd hear a whisper or two, and then a conversation, and then suddenly the room would be buzzing. And if they hadn't solved it by then, they would start to consult. Well, what are you trying? I tried this and it didn't work. What do you think about that? And they would all talk. And then gradually in another 10 minutes, it would die off. So they would consult long enough to get an idea of what to do next, and then they would go back to solo work and work out the details and finish the puzzle. And then there would be a small group and then the whole class group kind of debrief. I did it this way. What did you do?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't even think of that. Those kinds of things. So it's very cyclic. It's influenced somewhat by the personality, the preference of the student. We've collected data. Do you prefer to work alone or together? It's influenced by that. It's not influenced very much by teaching and learning styles. We thought it would be, but statistically, no, it's not. It depends more on the type of puzzle, the stage of the puzzle, the preference of the student, I think.
Strikes me it's actually a lot like the academic process. We work on something, we present it, we get feedback, we revise it, and then we present it.
Right, yes. And when you work with your colleagues,
that's how we
you
do
have
it.
a conversation, you get all excited and steamed up and get a whole bunch of ideas, and then you go back to your office and work through the details yourself, right?
So what does that say about how we should structure more of our classes? I mean,
Well,
that has some pretty profound implications.
It does, I think. And, there's been this very wholesale move in the last 20 years to group work as the kind of be-all and end-all from kindergarten on up.
I feel a huge pressure that I don't do enough of that. Right?
And I never did it or liked it myself. And so what we are concluding is that good group work is very nuanced. It's not a one-size-fits-all by any means, and it has to be, if you want it to work in a particular context, it has to be very carefully structured and facilitated by the teachers. And it's appropriate for some phases of work and not for others. And the students know that. Our students have pointed out, in fact, the difference. They write a lot about the difference between the kind of collaborative work they do in our class compared to the usual group work.
Right.
And many of them say, I hate group work except in this context. It's wonderful. And they've made the distinction that we have started to make as well, Doug and I, between working together and learning together. And a lot of group work is working together for the sake of working together.
Exactly.
Right? And it should be focused around learning together and this sort of backwards design. What do you want them to learn and how can they learn it together? That should motivate when and how you do group work rather than the other way around.
And you're right. I mean, a lot of how it's like even in middle school and high school, in the work world, you're going to have to work together, right?
Yes.
And where the group work is valued for the sake of group work rather than how is it going to help you?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think that knowing, I mean, we talk about this with the students. They write one of their reflection assignments about their experience in the course and elsewhere working with others. And we talk about this, and you know, there was that move in the business world to open office concept, and well, that's not what people need all the time. There are certain strategic moments in a problem-solving process when it's a good thing, but you also need individual private workspace and work time. So I think it really does have implications.
Have you transferred the things you've learned about group work to other classes?
Yes, yes. In some of the introductory liberal education course, for example, yes. And I no longer feel that pressure to do group work for the sake of group work. I'm more careful, more strategic about when I use it and how I use it, I think. Yeah.
So the other thing I wanted to ask you about was your commitment to the institutional side of teaching. You were the first Board of Governors teaching chair here, and so I'm curious your reflections on what you've seen about the institutional commitment to supporting teaching over the time you've been here, and even while you were board chair and since then.
Well, I think the creation of the Board of Governors teaching chair was a high point. We had research chairs before that, and I was part of one of the early conversations about the fact that on paper we value teaching and research equally, and yet in real life research gets a lot more attention in various ways, and it gets funding, it gets publications, it gets publicity, it gets chairs. And so I think the move to having a chair in teaching was a very positive sign of a value for teaching. And I'm encouraged that in the institutional changes we've been through with the move to comprehensive university status, that we also every time also talk about maintaining our commitment to undergraduate teaching. I think that that's really important, and certainly been very important to me. I've enjoyed my research career. I was reasonably successful at it, but I've also valued teaching at least equally, and more recently it's hard to even separate my teaching and research. I think I've been very fortunate. I'm at a stage now in my career when I can make that shift. And for younger people, it can be difficult. You know, so much of the promotion reality is your research has to come first, right? And so I would like to see us recognize research on teaching, the scholarship of teaching and learning a little more, and encourage people to find a good balance. That's one of the things the U of L has been very good to me. I think that I've had opportunities over the years to kind of pick and choose some projects that I was interested in, and to get involved in liberal education and to design some new courses, and I've been lucky that way.
It continues to be a battle, though, with, I mean, in arts and science, right? So much of the funding for new positions comes from Canada Research Chairs, which is driven by research grants. So there are a lot of things, the policy environment within which the university operates, the incentives even at the institutional level, as much as there might be people who want to see the teaching side valued, there's a real imperative that drives the research.
There is. And I never quite know what to say to a young faculty member. What advice do you give, you know? Focus on your research enough to get yourself promoted, and then you have more freedom, and you know, that's a way of life.
I always think that stage of career after you've got tenure is a really interesting one, right?
It is.
Because that worry about job security's gone a little bit. Right. And I mean, the first few years of teaching, you're just so busy,
exhausting.
It's survival mode, right?
Yes.
But now, okay, you're there, you've got some security. Now, if you want to, there's a really nice opportunity there to think about what you want to do, what kind of teacher you want to become, things that you had to patch together now you can try to do properly.
Yes, and your research by then hopefully is well underway, and if you're established, you can manage to keep both going in creative ways. Yeah,
but it continues to be a challenge, though. So another course you do is on mapping, and what does that involve?
Yes, this is a course that I did for the first time last spring. It was piloted the year before by Jan Newberry in the anthropology department, and I was lucky enough to do the second round and benefit from a lot of her expertise and experience. It's a liberal education course, and we refer to it as the mapping course. Its official title is the First Year Experience, Mapping Our Communities. And it's a course that's designed to help students with the transition from high school to university. So we use maps and mapping fairly loosely as a metaphor for getting to know a new environment, and we talk about the university environment as a physical space, as a social space, as an academic space. So it operates on many different levels with maps loosely tying it all together. It's really interesting and fun. Once a week we have a guest speaker, so we bring in people, some of the best speakers and professors from a lot of different departments. We've had Jay Gamble from English talk about a particular prairie writer and scrapbooking as a form of mapping. We've had Leroy Littlebear from Native American Studies talk about maps, the Blackfoot maps of this region.
Yep.
Renee Barendrecht from Geography also talks about maps of the region and takes the students out for a coulee walk and talks about the geomorphology of the coulees.
And it's quite striking for people who aren't from here.
Yes, who aren't from here.
Absolutely.
And even for those who grew up here who've never heard a kind of scientific approach to the study of the coulees, the wind and the erosion and the water. Yeah. We've had Louise Barrett from psychology talking about mapping the human, what it means to be human from a scientific point of view. So a wide variety of things. We've also brought in resource people from different offices on campus, so the co-op and applied studies people come and talk. Every Friday the students do an activity, so we had an amazing race on campus where they were in teams. There were 6 teams, and each team had treasure hunt clues that would send them to successively to 4 different offices on campus. So they got to find out where writing services is, financial aid, the cash office, the counseling office, the accommodated learning center, all those different places, and find out that people are really friendly in those offices.
And want to help them.
And want to help them and gave them resources. And the week after that, a whole bunch of students marched up to financial aid and applied for scholarships. So we try to introduce them to a lot of the different resources that are available for students that they hear about briefly at new student orientation but don't really know about. Help them with study skills. So we talk about thinking and learning styles. We talk about writing papers. We have library tours. They do a treasure hunt in the library to find sources. They had to write 3 papers, and the first one we had a round where they handed in a draft and got comments from me, and then they had a class session where in groups of 4 they would edit each other's papers and make comments and read each other's papers. So it's a real mix of things, but somehow the mapping ties it all together really nicely, I think, and it's really exciting. And as a final project, in teams, the students make a multimedia map of campus, sort of the map they wish they'd had when they arrived here. So some of them used PowerPoint, or some of the IT people came in and did a talk on different software they could use. And so they put together multimedia maps of campus with interviews with profs and clips of various things and links to resources and offices. They're really amazing.
Those must be fun to see.
It is. We have an open house the last day and invite everybody who's ever had anything to do with the course to come and see all the maps.
It struck me that we tend to be very narrow and focused, narrow in the kinds of assignments that we assign.
Yes.
When you're a little more creative, it engages students because they're doing something different. But it can also push them outside their comfort zone a little bit, right? And they have to express what they've learned. But you disassociate that from the form, like, right? It's the focus is on.
And we work really hard at creating a community. The students do a lot of these activities in teams that they're in from the beginning. We have undergraduate students, senior students who act as tutors. So each team has a fourth-year student as a tutor that kind of helps them with things and gives them advice. And
have you heard back from the graduates of the previous offerings? Has it been helpful to them?
Yes, I have. And some of them are now in follow-up liberal education courses, which is really exciting.
Always a good sign.
Yes, so that's really positive.
That's neat. That's a neat theme and something we need to do more. The transition from high school to university is frightening for a lot of students.
Yes.
And I'm teaching first year again for the first time in a couple of years, and I'm struck again by that they really want to do well. They're not lazy, they're motivated, but
they don't
they're
know
overwhelmed,
how.
right?
And exactly, and this goes back to what I was saying earlier, that we take for granted so many of the skills that they need to do well. And this is yet another way of making explicit for them some of those assumptions and connections.
The one that I've really been struck by is citations and sources.
Yes.
And we complain that students don't cite sources properly, they plagiarize, but I actually stopped and asked them, how many of you have learned how to do this in high school? And very few of them had ever done it. And they really want to do a good job. They're scared about plagiarism, but nobody's ever taken the time to teach them how to do it. And they're so grateful if you just actually back up and here's how you do it and come to me with questions.
This is APA style. This is what you have to cite when. And I think there's a lot of skills like that. You know, how do you take notes in a lecture class? How do you take notes in different styles of class settings, and all those kinds of things are really important.
That's one of the big things I've learned from you, is when I said that you're somebody I draw an inspiration from, is that we need to not make those assumptions and really engage the students and help them. And
that's the bottom line
absolutely,
to me,
that's
right?
what we're here
Student
for.
learning is what we're here for, and anything we can do to make that go more smoothly for them is important.
Absolutely. Well, thanks very much, Shelly. Appreciate your time.
Wonderful to talk to you.